Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO membership, affirmed by its outgoing Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg at the three-day summit in Washington, D.C. Now, NATO members who are favoring a faster membership track for Ukraine included the word irreversible in the joint declaration to demonstrate that Kyiv has moved closer to entry into the alliance since last year's summit. Speaking to reporters, Stoltenberg outlined the alliance's plans to aid Ukraine in the year ahead.
We will support Ukraine by planning and coordinating donations, and will manage the transfer and repair of equipment. We will also provide support to the long-term development of Ukraine's armed forces. This will not make NATO party to the conflict, but it will help Ukraine to uphold its right to self-defense.
NATO pledged a $43 billion worth of military aid to Ukraine in 2025.
Agreed that 40 billion euros is a minimum baseline within the next year, and to ensure sustainable funding for Ukraine to prevail. We also agreed to review this at our summit in 2025, not least to ensure it continues to meet Ukraine's needs. We are not doing this because we want to prolong a war. We are doing this because we want to end the war as soon as possible.
Now, in a big boost for Ukraine, United States, Netherlands and Denmark announced that the first NATO-provided F-16s were on their way to Kyiv and would be flying this summer, following months of preparations. During the summit, NATO gave a stern warning to China over its alleged assistance to Russia in the war against Ukraine. In a joint declaration, the 32-member military alliance squarely blamed Beijing for fueling Moscow's aggression against Kyiv. Now, the joint declaration read, and I'm quoting here, "We call on the PRC as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council with a particular responsibility to uphold the purposes and principles of the UN Charter, to cease all material and political support to Russia's war effort." In response, China warned NATO against provoking confrontation and rivalry. A spokesperson for Beijing's mission to the European Union said that the military alliance should stop hyping up the so-called China threat. He said, and I'm quoting here, "It is known to all that China is not the creator of the Ukraine crisis. China's position on Ukraine is open and above board." Meanwhile, another familiar yet unpredictable challenge lies ahead of NATO: the possibility of another US administration led by Donald Trump. The Republican Party's nominee has consistently sent mixed signals about his commitment to collective defense. NATO members are seen as wanting to Trump-proof military aid for Ukraine ahead of Trump's possible re-election. For more on this, we are now being joined by Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, who is a foreign policy expert, and he's joining us live from Normandy in France. So my first question to you: Kyiv has, of course, moved closer to entry into the NATO alliance, and Ukraine's NATO bid is sure to antagonize Russia even further. So do you feel that NATO is not really taking any peace plan into cognizance with a step like this?
Well, peace plans depend always on two sides. And I think what no one has reported about this summit, Viktor Orban, the Hungarian prime minister, who is normally nearer to Moscow than many others in Europe, has gone to Moscow. He has gone to Kyiv first, then to Moscow, and then to Beijing. And he has agreed with this declaration of a NATO summit. And this is, for me, one of the interesting facts. Russia has, through its aggression to Ukraine, reached something that no one expected anymore in Europe. First of all, war in Europe, within Europe, and second, a united front against any aggressor in Europe. And this is, first of all, against Russia, and you feel like back in the 1970s, 1980s in the Cold War. And on the other hand, please, the Chinese should, let's say, take note of the fact that the Europeans see exactly that China is not neutral in this war and does not seem to be interested in helping hands of other NATO members to stop this war. NATO would like to see the stop of this war tomorrow. Many countries, even my compatriots in Germany or in France, would like to see an immediate stop, but at what price? The price is, would you abandon, let's say, part of your territory? Would India be ready to abandon a part of its own classical territory, which has been always, let's say, part of a former Soviet Ukrainian Republic in the past, the East? Would you allow this? And therefore, the Russians can't say only, well, we are ready, but only under our conditions. The aggressor is defining the conditions, or the aggressed nation is defining its conditions. Where is the real problem? And what NATO is doing today is just reinforcing by many means the Ukrainian air defense. When you look at the bombs of last week against the children's hospital, etc., well, please, these are crimes of war. Even the United Nations had to acknowledge this. And therefore, NATO is doing, well, its best to help the Ukrainians to defend themselves. It's not a war against Russia beyond Ukrainian borders, not at all. It's a war of the Russians against the Ukraine. And we are a bit confusing when you look at international media, who is the aggressor, who is the aggressed nation. Therefore, it's a clear signal, this summit, against Russia, and Russia should be ready to finally to begin real peace negotiations, not under a dictator, or not as a dictate, if you want.
So strong words coming from you while you say that NATO would want a stop to this war tomorrow if it could. But there has been so much discussion about the ongoing war within the NATO bloc and, of course, sending more weapons to Ukraine. There are lives being lost still, even if NATO would want an end to this war tomorrow. But do you, however, feel that the NATO bloc has given due consideration to the various peace plans really and the proposals by different stakeholders?
I think so, yes. NATO has done, they have been testing different solutions, different peace prospects, but there is only one answer from Moscow. The answer from Moscow is, please, you have to give us what we have conquered in the last 2 years. It's the eastern Ukraine, and finally it's the Crimea. I think on the Crimea, the Ukrainians would have been ready to talk about a specific intermediate solution for the next 20, 25 years. No problem. But you can't expect from the Ukraine to give back or to give over to Russia something which was Ukrainian before. And therefore, what NATO partners are doing, it's defending the territorial integrity of Ukraine. Full stop. Or more or less.
Okay.
There is not any, let's say, declared war against Russia. No.
So very quickly, with Kyiv moving a step closer to the membership, what do you view as the road ahead from here on?
Well, this is, for me, it's a critical question. It's clear NATO has said for the moment, NATO membership only once the war is over. And I think this is the clear line of the big majority of heads of state and of government of the NATO members. It's clear. Only after any war, yes. Not during the war and not now.
Okay, thank you so much, Joachim Bitterlich, for joining us with your insights on that. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.